A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video talking about how the Yubel deck had shockingly already started topping events in the TCG with its top 8 finish at a 300-person regionals in Iowa. I went over the deck list, which in my opinion was excellently built, and discussed some of the power cards the duelist used to essentially blow his opponents out of the water, and the fact that no one really knew what the deck did, because of course, Yu-Gi-Oh players don't read, and even if they did, I don't think that would have stopped him from having massive super poly plays that took away 5 of his opponent's monster, which he actually said he did during the tournament. The main point of the video was that it was really cool to see some niche, strange, and unexpected non-fire decks be able to compete, and that Yubel could definitely be something to look out for in the future, especially considering its new spell card, Nightmare Throne, is absolutely ridiculous for the theme and isn't even out yet. It's a starter, drastically improves consistency, and can add cards to the hand so that ones like Super Poly and Eternal Favorite essentially become free to use. Well, everything I said in that video just got multiplied by double because it appears that Konami is on a serious crusade to turn Yubel from a theme that didn't actually work in any competitive capacity for like 15 years into a legitimate, dare I say, meta threat, and I'll explain why. Right now in the TCG, Yubel is fine, and I think that it's a solid deck. Going first, you have some cheeky combos you can pull off by adding in a small Unchain engine that gives the deck significantly more disruptions, while also adding cards that synergize with the theme. Going second, you can play the most powerful hand trap in the entire TCG and Dimension Shifter, as the Yubel cards can be added even from the banish zone and still trigger when banished, as well as arguably the most powerful board breaker in the TCG being Super Polymerization, which is absolutely absurd in Yubel whether you go first or second, as you can use all your opponent's effect monsters, which realistically is going to be every monster that they put on the field. My point is that Yubel is solid as a competitive deck as it stands, but it does have some consistency problems, and more importantly, the deck kinda gets annihilated by Nibiru the Primal Being. If you don't specifically have Yubel and Samsara D-Lotus, there really isn't a great way to counter it. At least that was the case with Nibiru until a couple of days ago when Konami revealed the new promo card Phantom of Yubel. Phantom of Yubel is the theme's second fusion monster, which for practicality reasons, I'm just gonna choose to ignore Neos Wiseman for this video. The card is excellent and as expected has the 0/0 stat line much like all the rest of the Yubel monsters, while also being a Dark Fiend. The materials are really easy to work with, as Phantom just requires a Yubel monster plus any fiend with 0/0 stats, which, let's be honest here, is like the entire Yubel theme and then some. Phantom of Yubel doesn't need polymerization or technically even contact fusion, as to summon it, you simply return the materials from your hand, field, or graveyard back to the main or extra deck, which is a godsend and makes the card super easy to bring out. Another thing is, this card is much like Vicious Astrolabe, being that there are no restrictions as far as how many copies of it that you can summon in a single turn, so that alone probably means that you're going to be playing multiple copies of it. Konami did build in an effect that restricts Phantom from being used as fusion material for other fusion monsters, but then again, there are these blue cards called Link monsters that pretty much every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh uses, so even if we can't use one for another fusion card, that's fine because we can just use it as fodder for Link monsters if necessary. The first effect is as standard Yubel as you could possibly get. I take no damage and I can't be destroyed by battle. But the second effect is where things get really spicy. Phantom's second effect is just like Samsara D-Lotus, except you don't need to have 2 monsters on the field to use it. When your opponent activates a monster effect, you tribute Phantom as a cost to change that monster effect into destroy 1 Yubel monster on your field or in your hand/deck. This effect is obviously amazing for Yubel, as bare minimum, the theme now has an instant counter to those devastating Nibirus that pretty much could cripple the deck by itself in the past. In fact, now, if your opponent does try to hit you with Nibiru, you can simply negate the Nib, pop a Yubel in your deck, not only extend via the floating effect of the Yubel destruction, but also you can make a second copy of Phantom to use during your opponent's turn as negation. Interestingly enough, the can't be used as fusion material clause in the effect does mean that you can't shuffle one Phantom back to summon another copy of it, so I definitely do recommend that you run multiple copies abilities of this card, but I don't really see that as a major downside. If you haven't seen what people have been cooking up, Yubel has some pretty insane combos that can end with some fairly devastating boards using just its engine and of course the supplemental Unchained package, which, keep in mind, is all searchable and accessible via Yama. This is because so much of the Yubel cards, well, pretty much everything is Fiend type. For those combos, not only are you summoning Phantom fairly early, about the 7th summon or so your opponent is going to have to Nibiru you either prematurely, or they're going to have a combination of like Nibiru plus Infinite Impermanence or Effect Failure. But thanks to some other new cards that just so happen to align with Yubel's level, you can also make full access of Omni Negation, which is something I never thought I'd be using in the same sentence as Yubel. This is possible with the brand new 3000 attack generic rank 10 XC monster Decanaload Veildraft, which simply put can negate any card or effect your opponent activates by detaching an XC material. It then gives you the ability to detach another material to pop a card on the field, which can technically trigger your Yubel cards, but more likely it's going to be used as an extra form of removal. This is more or less an insanely good card that only a handful of decks in all of Yu-Gi-Oh will be able to use, such as Trains, Eldritch, or the deck that uses it best of all, Yubel. Veildraft conveniently comes out in Legacy of Destruction just like Nightmare Throne, so Yubel will already be getting a huge boost to consistency and its destructive power / inboard making ability, but I also think that Phantom of Yubel is going to put it in a position to be a legitimate meta contender moving forward. Phantom is extra disruption, protects your plays from one of the most devastating hand traps in the game, can be used as extension for link climbing, and is insanely easy to summon. So much so that I think you'll routinely see players drop 2 of them in their first turn. Honestly, I think there's a ton to get excited about if you're someone who's interested in playing Yubel, or you're already playing Yubel but you want to take it to the next level. I've seen some builds in the OCG and some players over there theory crafting a Yubel engine into decks like Centurion, which is notoriously known for getting wrecked by hand traps, as a way to counter those said hand traps, and I guess can be discarded for something like stand-up Centurion if you draw multiple pieces. I would not be shocked at all if post the release of Phantom of Yubel, we saw Yubel actually end up topping a YCS. Not saying that it's going to win a YCS, of course, but I think that Yubel will definitely be fully unlocked, and I think it will have the potential to do it. Now for the little bit of bad news. We don't technically know when Phantom of Yubel is coming out in the TCG, and my duelist intuition initially pointed to Battles of Legends, which of course comes out every July in the TCG. The problem was, we already had a Battles of Legends this month, so I wasn't sure if they were going to drop another one in the same calendar year. However, Konami did in fact later put out a press release that a new iteration was going to be coming for us in July, and they confirmed that it will have support for a theme in Phantom Nightmare. So I think there was like a 99% probability that we will see Phantom of Yubel later this year in July in the new Battles of Legends set. I think it's so interesting that Konami pretty much ignored Yubel for 15 years straight, then out of nowhere gave us a bunch of support that makes her playable, and now with Nightmare Throne, Phantom of Yubel, and Veildraft, it really feels like Yubel's like a wrestler kind of getting this big championship push. Again, not saying that Yubel is going to win a YCS championship, but definitely be able to see play on a competitive level that, you know, Yubel never saw before. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. What do you think of Phantom of Yubel, as well as the newly found playmaking potential of Yubel as a deck, and maybe some of the other decks like Centurion or whatever else people are labbing up that could potentially run a small Yubel engine featuring Phantom of Yubel in their decks. Anyways, check out my Patreon in the description below. Consider joining for as little as $1 a month, and thank you for watching as always.